Mariah Carey, you have been haunting our Christmas season for the last 20 years with that addictive song. And this year, you will also be haunting my Halloween season because apparently you have a movie I've never even heard of. It was requested by Anthony on Patreon. It's called Glitter, a starring vehicle for Mariah Carey that has so many real-life occurrences surrounding the production and release of it. I'm kind of surprised it's not talked about more. It's not a good movie. It's basically been forgotten since it was released in 2001, and there's not even glitter in it. Glitter is like smaller particles. In this movie, they refer to glitter as larger pieces of plastic that are silver. Well, to me, that's confetti, not glitter. Directed by Vondie Curtis Hall, let's go back to 1983, the year this movie takes place, to discuss the absence of glitter. Mariah Carey first emerged in the late 1980s and quickly became one of the most well-regarded singers of all time, but she never made any film appearances until the often-forgotten 1999 production, The Bachelor. I think Glitter was meant to be her big debut, with a soundtrack also produced by the singer. The only problem was, it was scheduled for release on September 21st, 2001, a mere 10 days after the horrific events on 9/11. There's even an infamous photo of the Twin Towers burning as a billboard for Glitter is found in the foreground. Any movie coming out after this event was doomed for failure. But also, the reviews weren't great, no one cared for the soundtrack, and Carey herself was getting a lot of press for negative reasons, due to her public breakdown that led to some pretty embarrassing appearances. In fact, this movie was originally supposed to be released in August of that year, but they wanted to avoid bad press associated with Carey's incidents, only to then be released during a national crisis. In hindsight, the whole breakdown is more understandable when Carey addressed the fact that she was diagnosed with bipolar II disorder, and no celebrity deserves the scrutiny they receive when every person in the world is looking at you. However, it's been 19 years now since the theatrical release. Like I said, I have never heard of this movie before, despite its status as one of the worst films ever made. It's probably forgotten when the discussion of bad movies comes up because of the infamous day that coincided with its release. Even the Blu-ray only exists because of a cheaper Mill Creek edition, since Sony happens to have a deal with the company to put their lesser-known catalog of movies on Blu-ray. Glitter has Mariah Carey star as Billy Frank, an aspiring singer-songwriter who was put in foster care after her mother was no longer able to take care of her. The mother is also a singer, Lillian Frank, who fell on hard times while performing in bars. There's a jump in time, so we see just a little bit of Billy as a child, only to quickly cut to 1983. So this is a period piece, I guess. I honestly can't find any reason for this to take place in 1983. There's not a lot of iconography of the era. I guess the music is supposed to be similar to its period, but listening to the songs today, it just feels like the pop tunes you'd expect from the 2000s. They try to add some of that electric style from the 80s, but I don't think it's trying too hard. It's not really important, but why even have it set in 1983 at all? It never has an impact on the plot, and besides some cars and other devices, you wouldn't even notice this was 1983 besides the subtitle. You'd think they'd be talking about Return of the Jedi a little more. Mariah Carey is not an actor, but she's fine enough. She doesn't really have a lot to work with because her character isn't interesting. She should be, given the history she's established with. You'd think that opened the door for a lot of emotion or nuance, but the mother is basically forgotten for a majority of the runtime. She's only brought up again halfway through, and spoiler alert, she appears at the finale. She has a nice house on the countryside, but then again, earlier in the film, Billy caught a glance of the mother homeless on the street. This is meant to be thought of as a hallucination, but there's no reason to think this at the time. I actually thought this was the mother and the storyline was going to be dropped because Billy either didn't realize it was her mother or because she chooses to let go of her. You see, this doesn't work because I have no clue what the filmmaker's direction with this is. The whole finding the mother angle never becomes a forefront of the story. She has a boyfriend, Julian, who becomes her producer after buying her contract from Terrence Howard's character. This relationship isn't very effective either, because we fall into it abruptly, and it contains all the cliches you'd expect from a messy romance. He's controlling but has a soft side. He wants what's best for her, but he's also overly protective. I wasn't a fan, and they go through the usual motions to create a downfall. Billy's career was as a background singer, until Julian helped her to break out on her own. She has her friends tag along with her, which doesn't lead to anything dramatic, but it's endearing that she doesn't let go of her roots. Of course, like most movies with music players, she becomes an instant success with almost nothing standing in her way. It's too easy, very unrealistic, and just boring. Terrence Howard as Timothy is meant to be the villain, I guess, but he's never threatening. This isn't really a knock on the actor, because he's been amazing in other things, but he's terribly miscast. And the character just doesn't work. You can't show up for a few minutes and then suddenly emerge as a gun-toting gangster who is the least bit intimidating. Timothy shoots Julian. Why? Because Julian didn't pay the money for the contract. Where's Billy's place in all of this? Well, they break up after Julian has to get bailed out of jail. I suppose his death is meant to be this tragic moment, but it comes out of nowhere and you really don't feel the reaction of Carrie or the emotion of the climax. She goes on stage and sings what should be a powerful number. Remember A Star Is Born, when we spent the entire movie with a dysfunctional couple that we fell in love with regardless, and Lady Gaga has that unbelievable final song? Well, this is nearly the polar opposite of that. I understand why this is considered one of the worst movies, but besides being bad, there's nothing redeemable about this in the so bad it's good kind of way. It's completely forgettable, the songs are lackluster, the performances are bland, everything is shot like the year 2001 rather than looking like the 80s, and every emotional beat is wasted by the limited writing. I'm not really sure what the goal was here. It's not the first time a singer has had a theatrical debut and made a soundtrack to go along with it. You know, they could be hit or miss, but rarely are things this dull. I mean, think of the scenario for a second. Mariah Carey made a soundtrack for a movie that takes place in the 80s with a gangster record producer and a crazy mother, and it's still just so basic. It's boring. Nothing really happens because they don't take chances, and they also don't take advantage of the tested classic themes that make up good storytelling. It can't be cliché because it's not even trying to have an ongoing arc. Simply put, the glitter here doesn't sparkle, doesn't shine. I hate the final one-liners.
Have you thought about acting?
Not really. She'd be great in the movies.
Special thanks to Anthony for this Patreon request. Thanks for watching the video, and special shout out to Anthony, Anna, Kirsten, Lucas, Ryan, and Robert for the support on Patreon. By joining my Patreon, you can get exclusive videos and blogs, and for only $7, you can request your own movie review. I hope you stick around, cinephile, and have a happy, productive day.